To another episode of National Divorce Talk Raw. This is going to be kind of a straightforward episode. We're going to talk about how the news of Roe v. Wade being overturned has been received across America and what that says for the possibility of national divorce in the near future. This episode is being titled A Look Into Right Now. And we'll come to that in just a second. But first, just realized I muted myself. Sorry. Roe v. Wade was overturned recently and officially. There's been a lot of reaction to that across America in an extreme sense. We'll cover that here in just a second. But what's interesting for us here in CalExit is that the Roe v. Wade decision came days after Texas secession was in the news. We couldn't have planned that. And it came days after the largest secession conference was ever held. So Texas and California and New Hampshire held a secession conference. Days after that, Texas is in the news for finally, after months of work, getting secession on the Republican Party plank. Days after that, the Supreme Court decides to, and nobody knew this, release the decision on Roe v. Wade. Nobody had control of it. It's almost like the gods want America to talk about secession. We could not have planned for a secession conference at PorcFest, which had been planned for months, to happen within days of Texas finally getting the resolution on the Republican Party plank. That takes months to work through. And within days of that, the Supreme Court deciding when they were going to release the Roe v. Wade decision, something they probably planned out months ago. So how is it that the secession conference between CalExit, Texit, and New Hampshire Exit happened within days of Texas getting in the news about secession, and that happened within days of Roe v. Wade being overturned? Those are three separate events. They are uncoordinated, and yet they happen within days of each other, basically igniting the firestorm that we're going to cover here in a second. It's been a perfect storm. Perfect storm is when three or four or multiple storms collide into each other, unleashing their separate energies into each other, creating a massive megastorm. That's what's happening right now. The fact is that America was talking about secession widely because of what Texas did. And secession was in the mind of Americans days before Roe v. Wade happened. And then Roe v. Wade was overturned. And immediately in California and across America, guess what happened? People started talking about civil war and the breakup of America and secession when Roe v. Wade was overturned. Why? Because the idea was probably primed into their head days before because of the news massively covering Texas secession. So the media wanted to tone down talk of Texas secession, but really they blew it up and they inserted the idea into the American marketplace of concepts. And now we have Roe v. Wade turning into secession talk. So I'll cover all that. Hey, James, how you doing today? Pretty good. We're covering Roe v. Wade. We're covering the fact that we had a secession conference in New Hampshire with New Hampshire, Texas, and California, and Kyle Biederman and Mike Sylvia, the two most popular elected officials promoting secession. And then within days of that, there was the Texas bill in the political party there promoting secession, which got massive media coverage. And then within days of that, you had Roe v. Wade overturned, and you had people talking about secession. So that is today's story. That's what we're going to cover. Let me show you the evidence that we got so far. So let's go right into it. So first off, I want to say that this is the example of, here's the Texans, and they got their Republican Party to endorse secession as part of their Republican Party convention. That was all over the news. Here's an article, June 24th. Okay. Now, as we've always said at CalExit, that whenever anybody talks about secession, And whenever Texas does well in secession or New Hampshire does well in secession, we do well here in California. Because if you have successful secession movements, it ignites the imagination of everybody. So successful secession in Texas equals people talking about secession possibilities for California. Here's how we know that. How likely is secession to happen? And if Republicans take one or both chambers of Congress in November's midterms elections, it will likely suck the air out of the Texas GOP's inchoate secession plans, just as the 2018 midterms put an end to loose talk of Cal exit on the West Coast. So there's the week, a popular magazine talking about Cal exit and reminding people there was a Cal exit movement because people are talking about Texit. So when you talk about Texit, Cal exit comes back up in the conversation. We win, they win. Here's a little more evidence. So when we look at Cal exit after the Republican Party did what they did, what I wanted to point out is we're back in global news. So this is Turkish news. That's Turkic. This is simplified Chinese. I'm sorry, that's Arabic. That's Persian, so Iranian. This is simplified Chinese, which means mainland China. And then there's that. So we have global news in Turkic, Persian, and Chinese the week that Texas is talking about secession. World nations are talking about Cal exit. So when you talk about Texit, you talk about Cal exit. That's basically what I wanted to prove to you. Here's some examples from the Globe. Here's some examples from popular domestic media. Now let's get into the meat of it. A lot of people after Roe v. Wade happened are talking about how democracy's dead in America. So here's the news review. Petoskey News came out very recently, and they're talking about America being so divided we can't come back together. And this happens right after the Supreme Court released the Roe v. Wade decision. How do you come together when legislatures in many states try to outlaw, for example, parents trying to get care for their transgender children? Those same legislatures who decry any attempt by the state to impose its will on its citizens feels more than willing to outlaw things they feel shouldn't be happening in American society. How do you reconcile one party that looks at same-sex marriage as the affirmation of love between two people and the other party that sees that as an abomination in the eyes of God? So this is this newspaper saying, I guess Americans can't come together and stay as Americans because we have such massively different opinions on values. That's something we have been saying at CalExit for a long time. And that's what this article came to conclude when looking at the Roe v. Wade decision and the January 6th hearings. Can't bring America back together. Can't get people to work together. We have two widely divided value systems. Okay, here you go. Now, when Texas wanted to secede, good riddance. I don't know if you can see that. Boy, paywalls. Texas, good riddance. So there you go. So Washington Post wrote an article saying Texas wants to secede. Good riddance. Go ahead and get the hell out. We don't care. We don't view you as fellow Americans enough. That's what they said. Now, around the same time, here's another guy who said kind of good riddance. Clarence Page looking for GOP peace in our disunited States of resentment. June 26th, around the same time. And he was pointing out how he too felt that when Texas wanted to secede, better off without him. When former Governor Rick Perry hinted at secession in a Tea Party rally in 2009 after Barack Obama's election, I wanted to respond as a loyal Northerner with the title of a witty 2012 Manifesto for Southern Secession, written by Northerner Chuck Thompson, better off without them. So Texas wants to secede, better off without them. That's what one person says. He's reminding everybody that's how he felt. And then around the same time, hey, Texas wants to secede. Good riddance. Go ahead and get the hell out. That's how Americans talk to each other. Well, it shouldn't be a surprise that here's the Salt Lake Tribune, that with people randomly saying, go ahead and get the hell out, or good riddance, Texas, and Texas actually looking at and able to get secession into their political party platform, we're hearing now from a reporter in the Midwest that secession is now thinkable in the Intermountain West. So this is what we've routinely talked about called the normalization of the conversation. Basically, that the topic of secession would become normalized, okay to talk about. It's not a big deal. We can discuss this. We're now looking at confirmation that here's someone in the Midwest saying, for the first time ever, secession is a normal topic in the Midwest. This is a sign of proof of getting to the plateau where secession will happen, where it's normalized and so many people talk about it that it's not a big deal to do it. So here's another sign of the times. This came out very recently. Secession is now thinkable in the Intermountain West. That's the Salt Lake Tribune saying that. There's the rest of the details on the article. Now, when Roe v. Wade came out, Bill Maher says that in response, Americans are living in two different countries. Bill Maher says Americans are living in two different countries. He also claimed that Americans are living in basically two different countries after the conservative majority overturned Roe v. Wade. So here's another liberal saying Roe v. Wade is overturned. American values are so different. How can we live with each other? That's exactly what this guy is saying. Here's the reporter, and here's what he's saying. How can you live with people who have such radically different views on values as you do? That's what this reporter is saying. There it is. Here he is in the news review. And then here's Bill Maher saying the exact same thing. People have such a wide divergence on their values. They basically live in two different countries. So Bill Maher and this guy are saying the same thing roughly around the same time. We live in two different countries. Now here's the Atlantic magazine, and it looks like they're also taking the same stance. America's growing apart, possibly for good. The Great Convergence in the mid-20th century may have been an anomaly by Ronald Brownstein. Red and blue, roughly around the same time. It may be time to stop talking about red and blue America. That's a provocative conclusion of Michael Podhorzer, a longtime political strategist for labor unions and the chair of the Analyst Institute, a collaborative progressive groups that studies elections. In a private newsletter he writes for small groups of activists, Podhorzer recently laid out a detailed case for thinking of the two blocs as fundamentally different nations sharing the same geographic space. So that's a third person. Here's the Atlantic talking about how we're two separate nations because our values are too widely divergent. Here's Bill Maher saying the exact same thing, roughly around the exact same time. And here's another person in the News and Review saying the exact same thing, roughly around the exact same time. See a pattern? This is all because of Roe v. Wade. So we had Texas secession, and that was around June 24th. Calexa got really big. And then Roe v. Wade was overturned. And a lot of people, within days after that, here we go, looking at June 25th. So literally a day or two later. And already you're talking, this goes to the Texas can go ahead and secede. That should go there. It should go there. These two guys said Texas secede, but these guys said America's so divergent, we can't really stay together. They're two separate nations. And Intermountain West secession. I'm sorry. Let me get this right. This guy said we're two separate nations and we can't really work together anymore. So did Bill Maher. And the Atlantic magazine, a serious policy magazine that covers politics across both nations in the national regions in the Atlantic, America, and Europe, is also saying that. And here's partly what they're getting at. So here's the Israeli news, the Times of Israel, okay, not domestic news. So basically they had a Roe v. Wade protest in Arizona and they stormed the Capitol. Yes, that's right. They stormed the Capitol right after we got done. So people kicked in the door, burst into the place, and stormed the Capitol. So this is days after we're done having the January 6th hearings, where liberals say storming capitals to solve your political disputes is wrong, right? And it's treason. Then what do liberals do? They storm the Capitol in Arizona. So I mean, I'm not condemning it. I'm pro Roe v. Wade. I believe in a women's right to choose. I'm just trying to dispassionately point out to you, you have one side, the Republicans, who storm a Capitol because they don't like the way politics are going. And then the left criticizes them for it. And then immediately Roe v. Wade happens, and the left immediately storms the Capitol right after they've been spending weeks criticizing storming a Capitol. So we're now at a point in America where it's okay to storm capitals of government as a recourse, and both sides are doing it. Bad sign for stability. But that shouldn't be a real shocker. Here is English news. So remember, this is Israeli news. Here's the Israelis going, whoa, things look bad in America. Here's the English going, wow, things look bad in America. With the end of Roe, the U.S. edges closer to civil war. That's what the Guardian said recently, talking about Roe v. Wade. And here you go. Has the Supreme Court put us on the path to civil war? So this is another article, June 27th. This is the LA Times saying that. And here is the British newspaper saying that. Are we on the path to civil war? And here's an example of people storming a Capitol to prove their point, and it being so shocking to American allies, it's covered in the news by them. So that's basically it. Just wanted to show you a snapshot of what people are talking about. We had the Texas secession. Calixit was in the news. We had the January 6th hearings right before Texas secession. Then we had, which just told people America's destabilized. And then we had the Roe v. Wade decision being overturned. And all that happened within roughly days of each other. And we couldn't plan that. And so here's the result. People are talking about Calixit. People are talking about secession. Secession is now normalized in the Midwest. And you have foreign countries covering the dissolution of the United States and the potential for civil war over Roe v. Wade. Then you have multiple American commentators saying, we're already two separate nations because our values are so divided. That's what we've been saying in Calixit for a long time. America's broken. It can't be fixed. Looks like people are finally starting to get the message. You're right. You're right. Okay, we'll be back with another episode of National Divorce Talk Raw in a few minutes. We have a couple shows coming out. We'll be talking about Texas and Nancy Pelosi and how she treats minorities. Get ready for that one because I am Latino, so it's going to be a little bit spicy. The level of talk about Calixit now after Roe v. Wade overturning is actually quite inspiring. California clearly wants Calixit. Well, the LA Times talked about this, civil war. And yes, as we covered, if you watched our Yes California meeting the other day, massive growth on the Yes California social media pages at Twitter and Facebook after Roe v. Wade. As we've said many times at Calixit, 32% of California wanted secession in February 2017. Those people never went away. Suddenly, Roe v. Wade is in the news, and people we have never met, never coordinated with, are immediately talking about Calixit. How did those people that we've never met, never coordinated with, talk about Calixit? Unless that 32%, actually 47.5% of Californians from February 2017 is still there and still interested in the concept. It's nice to be proven right. It's a theory we've had for a while that the amount of support we gained with the election of Trump never left. People left the movement, but they didn't stop believing. When we see spontaneous support for Calixit because of Roe v. Wade, it proves the point. So we'll be back soon with another episode, and stay tuned for more information because we'll keep you informed about things the mainstream media will not make sure you're informed about, and we'll do it repeatedly. Thank you. Oops, sorry. Already planning the other episode.